Frank Isola, our friend from the New York Daily News, joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's up, Frank?
Hey, Rich. How are you today?
So did you speak to Porzingis' brother yesterday? Did you? Your newspaper did? Who?
Yeah, I spoke to him late yesterday afternoon.
And?
Well, he's not too surprised, a little upset. I think they figured that there was a chance that this could be out there. They don't think it's going to happen. They think the Knicks would kind of be crazy to do it. But at this point, nothing surprises them in terms of, what the Knicks could do. And I think once Kristaps did not show up for his exit meeting, I think kind of all bets were off at that point. The Knicks still haven't spoken to him since then, which absolutely makes no sense. So everything is on the table. I tend to doubt that he's going to get traded. Why would you trade it? You're trying to rebuild, and he's a 21-year-old kid that you already have 2 years under your belt trying to develop. So that makes no sense to trade him.
Unless they figure that he's the only possible piece that could bring in absolutely anything and kickstart something that was 80 and 166 over the last few seasons, Frank. I think it's sheer madness. And the thing that I have a problem with the most is it is an admission that the last 3 years was a failure, and the person who failed at it feels completely comfortable to go ahead and hit a reset button, which means it's the problem from up top. That's the way reading of it. Frank, you tell me how it's landing there in the metropolitan area.
I think that's how a lot of people look at it, because how can you say you're rebuilding and you're going to trade this guy, then you're going to start all over, and if you're going to get just draft picks, that's the great unknown. And you don't know about, I was just looking back at like the 2012 draft. You had Anthony Davis was first. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was second. Look how he's panned out. Bradley Beal's a good player. Dion Waiters was fourth. Tristan Thompson's fifth, but that's a role player. You had, Terrence Ross was the eighth pick. Austin Rivers was the 10th pick. Yeah, those are good players. But, you have a guy like Kristaps Porzingis. If Porzingis was in the draft today, I would suggest to you he would be the number one pick. Once again, he's only 21 years old. So I can't – maybe Phil Jackson is doing this as a way to shake Porzingis up a little bit and say, oh, you think that you can call us out and not show up at a meeting and we're going to get nervous? Well, guess what? There's always a possibility that we can trade you. So it seems to be silly. I think you'd want to maintain a good relationship with your best player. But then again, Phil did not maintain a great relationship with Carmelo Anthony, and we see how that all turned out. And that seems to be going down the same road as Porzingis. At some point, the Knicks have to end this nonsense. They have to either fly over to Latvia or bring him back here and talk to him. Because why would, we know how important one player is on a basketball team. It could be the difference maker. And why have a bad relationship with this guy who's supposed to be the star of your team?
Well, so what is the Carmelo situation? Because I imagine that's one star player, obviously in his 30s, that we haven't heard being bandied about when you've got the Paul Georges and Jimmy Butlers of the world being thrown out there. That would be certainly a name that would garner some interest and certainly shake things up in this super team era of everybody trying to combine forces to get in the Warriors district, Frank.
Yeah, and I think that makes the most sense, and I don't know what kind of deal the Knicks could do. I can't imagine the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to trade Kevin Love for Carmelo Anthony. That would make no sense. But if I were Cleveland, maybe you're hoping that Carmelo could work on some kind of buyout, and then you could sign him for obviously a really low number to bring him in. Maybe there's some kind of trade, and you get a third team involved. I think at this stage, Carmelo knows that his future is not in New York. If he wants to kind of change the narrative on the last part of his career, he's going to need to move on. And if he goes to Cleveland and ends up with LeBron, at least for 1 year, that's a good thing. And who's to say that the two of them don't get up and leave and go to L.A. the next summer, which would also be on the table. So I think at this point, Carmelo knows that his future in New York is over. It's not going to happen here, even though he is under contract and even though he still has a final say on whether or not he gets traded to a certain team, but also the Clippers would be involved as well. So I expect something to happen. Probably in July, maybe even in August, but I think something's going to happen before training camp with Carmelo.
Frank Isola of the Daily News joining us here. And what is going on in Cleveland? Chauncey Billups reportedly having a second conversation with Dan Gilbert today, Charles Oakley's best friend, and Dan Gilbert. What is the scoop right there? Because LeBron's future, short and long term, can depend upon how that relationship burgeons, should it have to at all take place.
Yeah, and if I'm Chauncey Billups and I do get that job, I think the main thing is you're trying to do everything you can to get LeBron James under contract for at least 2 more years after this season, because if it's going to be a championship team, you have to have LeBron James there. And Chauncey's wanted something like this. He's obviously a very bright guy. He knows the league, but it's also a different job when you're becoming a general manager. And he's going to walk into a complicated situation. Yes, you have LeBron there, but they do need to make some moves to close the gap with the Golden State Warriors. And there's always like minor moves. It's not, we all know that, yeah, it's great to have LeBron James on our team, but it's about making those minor moves that really sometimes, make the whole team come together and can make you a championship team. So, yes, on the one hand, he's walking into a great situation if he gets the job because LeBron is there. But, he's got a long road ahead of him because if you want to be the general manager of the team that loses LeBron James for a second time, which would certainly be in play next summer.
And then you hear conversations like DeAndre Jordan being coughed up or offered up by the Clippers for the number 4 overall selection, and then you hear draft choices hopefully being packaged together by other teams for Paul George. What is, based on your conversations and hearing, getting ready for the draft that's going down in Brooklyn tomorrow night, Frank, about how general managers view star players and the possibility of drafting one, and how that actually is viewed in building a team right now in the super team era?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. If you look at most of these teams in the East, I think Boston is a perfect example. They're kind of like right there. They're close to being, a top legitimate championship contender. I get it. They made it to the conference finals, but I don't think we thought they were going to be Cleveland or Golden State. It's almost like these guys are waiting, for LeBron to get a little bit older, maybe waiting for the Golden State Warriors, for them to break up, which might not happen for 2 years from now. So it seems like the rest of the league is rebuilding and kind of waiting for Cleveland and for Golden State, for those two teams to kind of run their course. And there's so much movement at this time of year, and for whatever reason, there seems to be more activity than usual because I think a lot of teams don't want to take on crazy contracts. I think a lot of teams are trying to rebuild and taking the much longer approach in terms of building their team because of what's going on right now with Cleveland and with the Golden State Warriors.
And the thing about the Porzingis stuff that really got me was hearing that the Celtics were calling for him. There's no way, right, that if Porzingis goes, that he would be shipped and put into a green uniform for him to lead the Celtics to hang another banner and come into Madison Square Garden year after year. I mean, would they really do something like that, Frank?
You know what? I question a lot of things that Phil Jackson does. I mean, I think most people do. But Phil Jackson is an old-school Knick, played under Red Holtzman. Everyone knows about the rivalry between the Knicks and the Celtics, Red Holtzman, Red Auerbach. I cannot imagine that Phil Jackson is sitting down entertaining, making a deal with the Boston Celtics. Plus, he also experienced the Boston Celtics as a coach of the Lakers, having played them in the finals twice and losing to them once and obviously winning his last championship. So I don't buy it. I can't imagine he's going to trade. Old-school Knick, Phil Jackson, is going to be trading his best player to the Boston Celtics, regardless of what he might be getting back. I just don't believe it.
And what's the surprise for tomorrow night? What do you think? The best chance for a surprise for tomorrow night's draft would be what?
Maybe something involving Paul George. Maybe some type of three-way that involves the Phoenix Suns and picks being moved. Maybe that's where the draft will start. Also with Boston, because remember, they had Markelle Fultz. They didn't want him, so they're going to pick third, and they're probably choosing right now between Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum. I would go with the offensive player, Tatum, who's a big-time shooter. There's been some talk that they're going to go with Josh Jackson, but he's a very good defensive player, big athlete, but not a great shooter. So there could be some intrigue at 3, but I think Paul George, that would be the big one. Will he get traded tomorrow? And if that happens, that would obviously be the big story of the draft.
And I'm surprised. Why isn't De'Aaron Fox being thrown out there? Just because of situations? Celtics didn't need Fultz, so why would they go with Fox? And then you got the Phoenix Suns. They don't need him, I guess, technically, quote unquote. And the Kings, I guess, would. So he would go 5th overall. Is that a need situation right now? Why Fox isn't being mentioned any higher?
Absolutely, and I don't think Fox is going to go below 5. That seems to be the case, and he seems to be the most polished in a lot of different ways when you do see him play and when you do see him off the court. So he's a big-time player. I'm sure the Knicks would love to get him at 8, but I think he'll be there at 5. The big one now will be Josh Jackson. The word was that the Celtics liked him at 1. Now maybe they're not even going to take him at 3. They'll take Tatum. So, the NBA, I got to give them credit. The playoffs weren't that great, But thus far, the offseason is certainly generating a ton of news.
There's no doubt. And we talked about this, I guess, last one for you, Frank Isola, the Daily News, that, I was highly critical of the lack of competition, and the super team era did not really lead to much in the playoffs at all. But perhaps it has caused teams to get more aggressive and creative, knowing the big gap and the difference between them and the Warriors, and what the Warriors did to a 73-win team to improve it, that might be now contagious. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, but I think it's also going to turn up the fans when you go into an NBA season thinking, well, it's really going to probably be the Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers again. We don't really have that much of a chance, and that really doesn't happen in any other sport. I mean, look at Nashville making the Stanley Cup Finals. I get that the Patriots are always good, but that's a single elimination tournament that they're in, and they've actually lost home playoff games before. In baseball, obviously, is a crapshoot as well. It seems to be, like the one sport where last July, it's funny, Kevin Durant's mother, after he won the championship, was saying, a lot of people didn't think he could do it. Well, actually, I think just about everyone thought that the Golden State Warriors were going to win the championship after he decided to go there over July 4th weekend. It's a problem that the league has from a competitive standpoint, but the ratings are good. So I don't think they care about that. But the next season will be interesting, because I think really now fans get the sense it's almost like a two-team league. As of right now, maybe things will change in the next coming week.
Yeah, and then maybe, just maybe, let's just extrapolate this out, Frank. Just maybe Porzingis stays put. So does Carmelo. Phil strikes gold again with the 8th overall pick, drafts another purple unicorn, and Derrick Rose stays to create the super team he said that he had created just by merely showing up last year. Maybe that happens, Frank.
They would be a super team in name only, but guess what? It's the results that make you a super team, not just the names on the back of the jersey.
I forgot about that.
That's right. They did too.
Take care, Frank.
Take care.
You got this, Frank Isola, the Daily News.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that, download our app. Please, just if it's a memory thing, just delete other apps. You don't need those apps. This app, the Rich Eisen Show app, you need that.